Hey, what's going on? This is Rustin.
Amber.
We're the power couple.
Thanks for joining, guys.
Yes. So this video is going to be about fear.
Fear.
Right? So there's many acronyms out there about fear, right? Forget everything and run, I think is one of them.
False evidence appearing real.
False evidence
That's my
appearing
favorite.
real. Yes. That's actually one of my favorites as well. And to be fair, fear is in every part of pretty much everybody's life in some way, shape, or form. Isn't that right?
Yeah. Well, it was all designed. I want to say designed. It was kind of created as a way of survival, right? So back when the Earth started, right? However you assume that it came to be, right? It was like us and like mammals, and fearful, right? Mammoths or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like, so there was that level of fear that was productive, because if we're standing there as a human, you have this giant mammoth in front of you, you want kind of that urgency and that fear to be like, hey, I gotta run, right? So that was helpful, that was productive, just as now, if we're in front of some kind of animal, right, that was large and that was coming at us, we would want to incite that fear to be able to go, uh-oh, like I'm gonna go run this way or whatever. So it all started as a productive thing, but then we started implementing as we've gotten into generations of increasing technology and different things and social awareness, right? So now we've started to input that fear in all kinds of aspects of our lives, and then using that same fear, the same concept around fear, into things that really aren't helping us, right? So in that instance, yes, it's fearful. Hey, I'm scared. This thing is in front of me. Let's run, right? But we take that same concept that we have constructed for that into, hey, I have a job interview today. I'm terrified, right? Like, and so if you kind of deconstruct that and you think about it, okay, wait a minute, is this actually something? False evidence appearing real. Nothing has actually happened. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about my job interview. Am I actually in fear?
You actually terrified?
Right.
Do you know what it is to be actually terrified?
Right.
There's few people out there that really know what it's like to be actually terrified. And I'll tell you, a job interview is not one of them. Getting in front of 1,000 people is not one of them. Right? So when you're looking at your fear and you're feeling that fight or flight come up, right? That, heart rate usually starts coming up, right? You get some sweaty palms, you start thinking these thoughts of, the worst case scenario. That's usually what happens. At least for me, it does. It's usually a good time to stop. Now you have a second there to redefine yourself. Mm-hmm. And if you could actually take that moment and go, is this coming from a fear that is going to serve me? Mm-hmm. Right? I tell Amber here often, and some other people, the only fear that I have left is the fear of not being 1% of a better version of myself every single day.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a serving fear. Right? There's not many of them. It could be a driver. A lot of people are fearful of success. Fearful of. I mean, there's 1,000 of them. I mean, pick your poison with that.
Not succeeding.
Not succeeding. Yeah, that's right. I mean, we can go through lists upon lists of the fears, and one of the things that's was brought up to me was that what is the opposite of fear? When you're in fear, think about what the opposite of, right? Which would be love.
Confidence.
Gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those vibrations are actually what is attracting to you, right? When you're in that fear mode, you're attracting that too. You will, 100%. If you're in fear that day, I guarantee you that you're going to come into scenarios that are going to be even more fearful, right? Because the universe says yes, clicks that button. So
I would have to say, though, that maybe, because there are certain feelings, right? So when we go for a job interview, right, most of us are not like, yeah, right, just chilling. There is a certain feeling that we have. So maybe it could be also identifying that and then change the wording behind, right? Because I know, like, especially with this generation, right? Oh my God, I'm scared. Bleep. I don't know if we can cuss on YouTube, right? Like, we're scared. Poop, whatever, right? And so it's like, I don't know if we can cuss on here. Can I spell it? I don't. But you guys, as I'm terrified. Oh my gosh, I'm scared to death, right? That's something I used to say all the time. Oh my God, I'm scared to death of XYZ. And it wasn't anything, right, that, like I said, it's not running from the lion, right? So identify it and then maybe choose a different word. A word that our mentor has used that we really like is uncomfortable, right? So something's uncomfortable, right? Like just got out of the pool, you're in clothes, right? I'm not scared. I'm uncomfortable. Like, oh my gosh, like my clothes are wet, they're on me, right? Like this is really uncomfortable. So choose that, because unless you can attribute that to how you're feeling with that of being chased by a lion and fear of your life, then I don't feel like we can use the same wording, right? So it would be seeing that and then realizing, okay, I'm not scared. This is uncomfortable right now, right? Job interview, it's for a really good, company. It's a lot more money, whatever. So it's uncomfortable, right? Maybe you don't know what to say, whatever it may be. So shifting that, right? It's not downplaying or not acknowledging a feeling, but it's maybe changing, like what you were saying, right, to yourself. What's a good example of, I know for those of you that do know Rustin, maybe if you don't, he was in the military. So what is something that you can attribute to an actual like fearful moment?
I don't really want to talk about super fearful moments because most people will not come into that scenario. They're law enforcement officers, first responders, stuff like that. You guys might actually come into some of those, and former military and active duty military. You might come into those actual terror moments, right? And those are ingrained in us for a reason, for survival, and they will serve you. They will in the moment. It is when we are identifying our everyday life as a terror moment that it becomes an unmanageable life, and it will keep you stuck exactly where you're at. Right? You could wish for a better life, but if you're scared to go live on Instagram, or you're scared to YouTube, right? Or you're scared to actually get down and journal, like as a man, you could be scared to do your feelings, right? To actually like express your feelings to somebody, and that's that part of it can keep you stuck exactly where you're at, and you will never. Well, I won't say never. That's a strong word. It is highly unlikely that you will evolve into somebody who has that better life that you desire, right? Becoming the best version of yourself, the fear is the first thing that I have found that will, if you can eliminate your fear in whatever moment it is, just for that moment, you have now become a better version of yourself. Doing something that is uncomfortable for you will move you into that better version of yourself, even if it's just for a moment. But that's still better than the previous day when you didn't do anything that was uncomfortable, and you went to work and you picked up the kids and you came home and you ate dinner and you kissed your wife, or whoever your significant other is, and that was it. You went to bed, and then you did all the same thing over the next day. That is not growth. Uncomfortability is where the growth actually is. So if you have fear that is holding you back from that growth, then you're not really getting anywhere, right? What are some of the things that people can do to break themselves out of that, or to identify and become aware of their, the fear that they have that's holding them back?
Thank you for saying aware, because it brought me back to our video on awareness, right? And so most of the time this happens, like for yourself, I'm going to speak for you for a moment, right? When he was in the military, right, there was a lot of terror and fear, right? And that made sense, right, for that moment. Certain things that are happening around you in your physical world, right, that is useful to be fearful, for survival, right? So when you're placed out of that situation and now you're placed in quote civilian life, right, and you're just living your life, or working at a job, you're married, whatever, that those things no longer serve you anymore. So it's learning to identify between you in a crowded mall and seeing it as, wow, there's a lot of people in here, versus I need to check around and make sure, right, be on the lookout, be this and that, right? So it's being aware in that moment, of how you're feeling, and maybe seeing it as like, okay, I'm aware right now, I'm having certain feelings come up of, right, when I was in that survival mode that was necessary, versus now I'm just in a mall with a lot of people, right? So I am feeling a certain way. I'm going to say it's uncomfortable, right? So try and shift that, um, so that more, we like to use the term like get the snowball rolling, right? So if you've seen those like cartoons where you have like this little bitty snowball, and as it starts to roll, it accumulates more snow, and then by the time it gets to the ground, it's like this huge, this huge thing.
It can work in both ways.
Obviously,
so you know.
right? But it's in those little moments. For instance, if you want to aspire to do a TED Talk, right? I don't know how many people are in a TED Talk, right? Thousands of people. It's going to be online for everybody to see. Then go live on your Instagram, go live on your Facebook, your YouTube, whatever it may be, even if there's 5 people on there, right? But it's growing through that uncomfortability of doing it. In my past life, I mean, a year ago, if somebody would have said, "Oh, you're going live on YouTube," I would have thought you're crazy. There's no way, right? Because this could be for the whole world to see, right? And it was really scary. It was uncomfortable, right? But I recognized that. I recognized that what it was in me, and I did it anyways. So that would be something for me. Have you? What's a moment that you've come upon that's been uncomfortable for you, that you've had to move through?
Well, one recently. So our mentor had actually asked me to interview with her in front of oh gosh, it was hundreds of people, but it's on YouTube, so thousands of people have, hundreds of thousands, if I'm not mistaken, have actually viewed this video. And one of my biggest takeaways from that was before the interview, I was really scared. I was really, really scared. And I was like, okay, well, let's look at this fear. And I had that moment. I had that moment where I got to journal and I got to write down, like, okay, I'm afraid because I'm afraid of what people are going to think of me. I'm afraid of, my programming as a man through society, and what people are going to say about me as a man, right? When all it really did was just empower me. That fear actually got me to a point in growth where I was empowered to go, you know what? I'm freaking doing this. This is going to be amazing. And people are going to look at this and they're going to go, man, that guy, brave dude. Brave dude. And I went there with, and I visualized about it. And I actually, I did like a whole, what's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? And I actually was like, okay, the worst case scenario is people go, you suck.
Yeah.
I don't like you on this YouTube video and all that stuff. And realistically, that doesn't really mean much to me, right? What somebody else's opinion is of me is of no consequence, right? I'm living my life. I do as I believe, and so there should be no fear in you being your authentic self, right? And that was one of the biggest things. And actually, I think you said something just a second ago about actually having that fear and being able to recognize that moment when you become aware, right? And that for me has taken practice. It has taken practice, right? And we're still learning this stuff, right? We're still growing through this stuff. And through that consistent action, once you become committed to doing it, to getting through that fear and just saying, you know what, it's no longer going to drive me. I'm no longer going to be stuck here. I'm going to live my best life, right? And I'm going to become the best version of myself. And you unpack that fear and you start to actually practice becoming aware of it, journaling about it, where it comes from, who it came from, because a lot of times it's not you, right? It's not you, right? I had military, I had a lot of other things going on there too, that gave me that fear, right? Parents, right?
Yeah.
And I'll be a little bit vulnerable. I have done it to my kids. I have made them fearful of things that really you shouldn't be fearful, right? Oh, wait, don't go on there because you might fall, right? Or don't do that. You could cut yourself, right? And there's a certain element of safety there in certain things, but doing that a bunch, you're actually going to see it. You're going to notice something in your kids. They're gonna change, and they may not be what you want to see,
Yeah.
right? And so become aware, remember those moments, and practice that small little part, right? Or oh, becoming aware of it in the moment is is challenging. The practice part will help it come quicker and quicker, and you'll just move right through it.
The other thing too to that is becoming aware, and then also recognizing, like what you're afraid of, right, in that moment. So, for instance, like let's all keep taking the job interview for instance, right? So we have now recognized that we're feeling a certain way about it. We're feeling uncomfortable. Okay, like you're saying, worst case scenario, best case scenario, right? So you become aware of that, and then ask yourself why. Like, what am I scared of? What am I uncomfortable with right now, right? So for a job interview, we'll just keep using that. Okay, so now I've realized that I'm scared of my job interview. Okay, why? Am I scared because I don't feel like I'm good enough for the job? Am I scared because rent's coming up, and if I don't get this job, then I'm not gonna have money, like, right? Like, so, coming to realize
we'll talk
what
about
it is.
lack and limitation on another
yeah, that's
one.
a whole nother
That's
one.
That's a whole nother
right?
nother
But then sometimes,
subject.
like, sometimes what we think in our head, and it kind of like normalizes it, right? Because a lot of times we just feel the feelings, we aren't aware of it, and then we just move through life that way. And if we kind of unpack it, for instance, I'll create a scenario. So for like me and him, right, with the YouTube channel, I wouldn't say I was really scared, but I was feeling uncomfortable because I was like, I don't know if he's gonna, be into this idea. I don't know if he's gonna join, right? Like all these different things. And a lot of times it's like I've just created a story in my head, and I didn't even talk to him, right? Like I hadn't even had the conversation with him, and I was already creating a whole scenario and story behind it, right? So we'll encourage you to use your imagination, but let's use your imagination on the positive side, right?
The other way.
So a lot of times, probably in relationships, oh, I'm going to talk to my significant other about this, and then you'll create a whole scenario. Oh, he's going to say this, and then I'm going to say this, and then this is going to happen. And you've already created it for yourself, right? So it's recognizing that, and then going, okay, I'm worried that I'm not good enough for the interview, for instance, right? And then you can work through that, but recognizing it first.
So you brought up a really good point about, of course. The thing that came to my mind was the judgment part of recognizing those things, right? So as I recognize my fears, I must come from a place of observance, right? And not of judgment, right? I'm fearful that my kid's gonna cut himself with those scissors, right? And you might think to yourself like, well, he's just being a good dad, right? When I look at it and I go, yeah, but how did I ran over there, I grabbed the scissors out of their hands, right? And I was like, no. Looking back at that, going, man, I was really afraid of this. I was really afraid of him hurting himself. I kind of feel bad the way that I did that, right? That's a judgment part. Don't do the judgment. Man, okay, that happened. How can I become a better version of that? How can I become a better version to be able to tell my son, hey, those scissors are sharp, man. Just watch out, okay? Appreciate it. And walk away knowing that it's gonna turn out exactly how it's supposed to, right? If he cuts himself, what's the worst case scenario? He gets some stitches. I got stitches when I was a kid. I don't know if you ever grew up in the 80s, man. You had stitches, you had broken bones, you got left home alone. There's a lot of stuff there, right? Well, I mean, we don't do that stuff for our kids, but becoming the conscious observer, right, of your thoughts, and especially in fear, that's that practice part. That's when you go, okay, I'm feeling fearful without judgment. I'm fearing going into that interview. That's because I don't know enough. That's because I don't have enough knowledge, or I'm not good enough for this job, or are they going to look right through me and know that I lied on my resume, or whatever it is, right? That's coming from a place of judgment, not from your soul's perspective, from the conscious observer. Okay? So remember that. Coming from the observer part is without judgment, and it will actually lead you into where that fear is coming from. It will help you get down to the why, right? If you ask yourself, what, 7 whys? 5 whys?
Depends on question.
Yeah, it depends on the question, but it's a root cause analysis, right? You used to do it in industrial settings too. Uh, but if you ask yourself why a bunch of times, you'll actually get down to where that came from, where that fear actually is coming from, and then you could actually work on it. You journal about it, but bless and release it. We can talk about that if you guys don't know what that is. Um, but yeah, it's pretty important to come from that place, because if not, I mean, a lot of times you're going to judge yourself, and then that person up there, boy, they just start picking you apart.
Yeah. So just to add, right? So our this with the scissors thing, right? Like, so our son is almost 5, right? So it's not like he's an infant and we're like, yeah, just play with scissors, right? But
he's got a will of iron, boy.
But at his age, right, like he understands, right? And we've taught him, like, we don't run with scissors, and, like, we're careful, like it's sharp, right? Da da da. So, but it's more about that he was almost instilling the fear in him, right? Because previously,
Never known it.
he kind of goes along and he just uses scissors and he holds it down, like all this stuff like that. We're not talking about, like meat scissors that are extremely sharp, right? So, but because kids are not born with fear. They, in fact, have like none. But it's us as parents, caregivers, society, etc., that kind of will instill that in them. Obviously, unconsciously most of the time. So he had to recognize it in himself, like, am I placing, this fear into him?
My fears.
Right. And
my
so,
fears are what's going to happen.
And even though with like the best intentions, right? Because it is with the best intentions. Obviously, we don't want our kids to get hurt, but it's knowing and having faith that, like, we have taught him and we have, about things like that with scissors, right? And how we use them. So it's having faith, knowing that he's going to be okay, one, and that two, he has taken the lessons and the tools that we have taught him around the scissors to then use them in a safe manner. But it's taking our beliefs, because children are so impressionable, right? So, like, adult to adult, if I have a certain belief about something, I can't really instill that in him, because he has free will and everything, in his own mind to choose to believe what I believe or not. Children, they're very impressionable. So what we say, right, the whole Santa thing, right, that is something that, like, they have taken on, because they're just pure consciousness and they're pure just awareness. So then everything that we say, they just internalize it, right? So if we're like, hey, watch out for that on a daily basis, over years, now they're going to be fearful of whatever that is that you're saying to watch out for, right?
Sometimes everything.
Yeah, and so we've really had to just, like, totally just rearrange and reprogram, like, our parenting and things that we've taught our children with the best intentions that we learned from our parents, right? And our parents had the best intentions, but the 80s was a lot of, like, go out and play, and they were not around, they were not, you know what I mean? But they had the faith in us to, like, know that we would be okay. If we hurt ourselves, broke something, we'd run in, all right, let's get that stitched up, but we didn't have that fear. And so, because it wasn't instilled in us, it was like, okay, go play, we'll see you later, kind of thing. Yeah. So, yeah, it's learning to shift that and to step out of the fear. And I know as parents, like, this is huge, for me with my youngest, with our youngest, because he is so driven, and he's literally fearless. I mean, this kid, if you guys have seen our like social media, he will be on, like, a bar stool with, like, a box and a step stool on top just to get to, like,
and a pillow
crackers
in
or
between.
Something. You know what I mean? He has, like, no fear, and so it's learning to, kind of, like, switch it, like, hey, maybe let's, ask for help or whatever, instead of, hey, get down, you're gonna fall, right? Because now I'm instilling that fear in him, which is, I don't want him to go forward with that. I want him to be jumping out of planes when he's older, if he wants to, right? And so,
yeah, he doesn't have to take on our fears.
Right. We're actually learning to shed them ourselves, and then we want to scale back and let them kind of live, because they're old enough, to understand a healthy fear versus an unhealthy one.
Yep. And it's very important to teach that type of stuff at a young age. I know us in the 80s, we never really saw it, but then, we had all these things happen to us, and that made us fearful, right? And now, what was it, like hitchhiking and, like, kids getting snatched up in the 80s and whatnot. Now we're so ingrained in hey, don't run out in the street, don't do this, don't talk to strangers, don't do any of that stuff, right? Some of that stuff is okay to mention to them. My point being is that the experiences that our children are going to have without the fear will be greatly accepted as a better way of life than with all the fear put onto them. I know as parents we want the best for them and we want them to live their best life. I'm telling you, they're gonna live their best life without fear, right? So let them gauge their own fears, teach them how to move through fear, and then they'll live a better life, just like our children are starting to do as well, and us as well as parents or as adults. We actually get to choose that. We get to choose what we're actually afraid of and whether or not we want to hold on to it, right? So, in recap, so what was this video about again? Fear?
I'm fearful that you don't know what you're going to say next.
Fear. Okay, so become the conscious observer, right? Get into your awareness of knowing when you are being feeling a certain way about whatever the situation is in your 3D world, right? It's usually in your 3D world, which isn't. I don't want to get into that. We can go down a whole rabbit hole about the 3D world. The other part is doing certain actions to move through the fear, like the why, the root cause analysis, writing it out, journaling, things like that. Another really good one is have an accountability partner of some kind, right? That will hold you accountable to seeing some of those fears, and also those people that you commit to, talking to about this stuff. They could also notice some of those fears in there as well, right? It's important to have that so that when you start talking about it, or oh man, this guy almost ran me off the road, or this or that, and I was just pissed off. I'm like, well, were you really pissed, or were you just afraid, and then it turned into anger, right? That type of thing. It's nice to bounce that off of people as well, right? And I have one right here, so she's really good at it. Anything else?
I think that's it. Just remember to like our page, subscribe, and check out more of our videos.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.